Hello everybody, this is Craig Chapello from the Center for Creative Leadership. And this brief video clip is intended to be a refresher for those of you who have already completed the two-day assessment certification workshop with CCL. It's not intended as a comprehensive deep dive into the report since we did that during the workshop. Rather, it's just intended to serve as a refresher. It's just enough and kind of just in time so that you can watch it before your next one-on-one debriefing. And for additional information about your role as a debriefer and the process involved with the Catholic Leadership 360, there are a couple of very useful documents you might want to refer to. One's called Role Description for Feedback Facilitators, and the other one is called Steps to Match Facilitators with Catholic Leadership 360 Participants. And both of those are available from Matt Hayes at the Archdiocese. The Leadership Roundtable has two report models that you'll be using. One is for lay leaders and the other is for priests. And the priest model has slightly different content and is a bit longer, but they both follow the same scoring rules and color coding rules. So if you can read the lay leader model, you can read the priest model and vice versa. So for the purposes of this refresher video, and just to keep things brief, we'll walk through just one model. We'll use the lay leader model in the video, and there are a couple places where I might point out that the priest model is slightly different in content. And then, of course, you'd want to review the appropriate sample feedback report that you'll be using that you received during the certification. So whichever model you'll be using in your one-on-one session, you would want to review that before you sit down with your participant. So we're just going to briefly walk through this sample report. You probably remember the cover page here, and there are some things to look for on the cover page of the report. The first one here is the date scored, and the reason that's important is because sometimes people will look at this array of raters and say, "Hey, you left one out. How did you lose one of my direct report raters?" And I typically ask them, do you know when the last person submitted their survey? And it's almost always because the person submitted the survey after the scoring date. So that's why that's important to know, the scoring date and then the array of raters listed here that return surveys. This next page is the highest level view of this individual's feedback report. And you can see down the left-hand column the 15 leadership competencies found in the lay leader model. And on the far right-hand side, we see the highest level scores from the feedback report. So the highest scores are going to be highlighted in green, and the lowest scores are going to be highlighted in pink under the all raters column. And remember, all raters, anywhere you see that in a CCL report, always includes boss and never includes self. So we see the all rater score down that color-coded column. We see the self score right next to it, so we compare their self perceptions. And then that center gray column is measuring something very different. You may recall at the very end of the survey, there was a question that asked, what are the top five competencies most important for success? And it shows the five that the self identified, the five that the superior identified, and in the far left column, a tally of how many people identified that competency within their top five. So it's just a way to see if everybody's kind of on the same page about what's important. It can also be used for some participants as they determine what they want to pay attention to in particular in their feedback report. So you'd probably want to pay attention to the things people identify as most important. There isn't a lot we can do here with the participant if I usually don't let them get too up or down about anything they see on this page because it's such a high level. There's really nothing behavioral here, nothing they could really do about it. That comes later in the feedback report. So if we take that all raters data and that self data on that far right-hand column and place it graphically against a normative base, that's what we have on the next page. And so, again, you'll see those 15 columns down the left-hand side. And then we see some icons. The red triangle represents the all raters score, and the black circle represents this individual's self-score. And so on the previous page, they may not know whether a number is high or low. Here it places them against a normative base so they can see how their number compares to other people who have taken the survey. You'll notice that numbers 14 and 15 in the lay leader model are not normed, and that's because those are two customized competencies, and so CCL does not have normative data for those last two competencies. So they won't have normative data. They'll get a numerical rating, but they just won't get it compared to normative data. But again, big picture here, high-level data can start to show themes and patterns of where they see themselves as higher and lower and where their raters see them as higher and lower. What we're going to do next is we're going to take that red triangle and we're going to break it out. Well, probably I should say before we do that, just a reminder that that line down the center of the report, down the center of this graph, now highlighted in blue on your screen, is the mean. And the line to the right is 1 standard deviation, and the line to the left is -1 standard deviation. And so 68% of everybody's results are going to be between plus and -1 standard deviation. So a little bit of a flashback to your Statistics 101 class, but when people ask, how does my icon get placed? It gets placed relative to the mean. All right, now if we take that red triangle and we break it out into the component rater groups, that's what we're going to see on the next graph. But before we do that, I want to say a couple things about the normative data. And the lay leader normative data is made up of other people in CCL's database. And so when your participant says, who am I being compared to, if they are using the lay leader model, they're being compared to a bunch of other managers, mid to upper level managers and executives in CCL's normative base. About 3,000 people, about 3,000 selfs, and approximately 20,000 raters. But again, they're being compared to people from for-profit companies, businesses, nonprofits. It's a big, broad database. If they're using the priest model, there's an important difference here, is that the priests are being compared, since we have collected more data from the priest model, we were able to build a database of just priests who have used this assessment. And there are, you see 99, so roughly 100 people. So if you're using the priest model and they ask who they're being compared to, they're being compared to other priests who have used this assessment. So about 199 people specifically, 744 of their raters. Right? They're both valid tools. They're just using different normative comparisons. Once we get enough lay leaders in our database, we could also offer a lay leader normative base as well. But for now, lay leaders compared to CCL, participants, priests compared to other priests. All right, you remember I started to say if we take that red triangle and break it out into its component rater groups, that's what we see on this page. The graph works the same way. It just shows a little bit of a different story. And one of my favorite questions to ask a participant is kind of that general open-ended question, what do you see here? And gives them an opportunity just to talk about what they see and ask any questions. And again, remember, we still haven't looked at any behavioral data. So if somebody's very excited about something they see or disappointed about something they see, there's really nothing they can do with this because it really isn't yet behavioral. It's just conceptual. These big high-level categories like listens or manages conflict. This is most of the feedback report looks like the page you see on your screen. It's the item level data, and for me, this is really where you find the gold nuggets. This shows in this example competency number 9, inspiring commitment. That table at the top just brings data that you saw on those first 3 charts. It brings it over to this page, but just for this competency. But the real important and the real interesting information on this page is the item level data, because then it shows me very specifically the behaviors people are commenting on and what each rater group is saying. And it gives me more texture and more granularity. So I can see, for example, that on number 49, publicly praises others for their performance. Almost across the board, people think I'm doing well at that because you see it's shaded in green and my highest scores will be shaded in green. But within that same competency, there's a item that says provides tangible rewards for significant organizational achievement, and people do not think I'm doing very well at that. And in fact, if you look at my self-score, I gave myself a 4, so that might be a little bit of a blind spot for me. So that's how I like using these pages, looking for kind of the highs and lows, themes and patterns at the behavioral level. So at the point where I'm creating a development plan, I can put these specific behaviors in my development plan. Again, just to remind you what we see on this page, the table at the top is information you've already seen, and it's brought over from the previous charts in the feedback report. We have item level data, and there'll be between 3 and 8 items for each of the competencies. We also see the data broken down by rater groups, and it gives me a chance to say, well, how does one rater group see me versus how another rater group sees me, and can be very useful. Also remember that the color coding, the 4 highest and the 4 lowest, are done by column, and it includes not just this page, but everything in section 1 of their feedback report. And that throws people off sometimes. So it's done by column, so the greens and the reds are going to be calculated in this example on your screen, just in the peer column, and then the highest will be shaded in green and the lowest shaded in red. Also remember that there are some open-ended questions. The 2 lay leader open-ended questions you see on your screen, it's about effectiveness. And in the priest model, the questions are a bit different, but they're getting at the same thing. What is the person doing well? What do they maybe need to do differently? Couple tips and tricks, and we talked about this in the certification, but always make sure to read these carefully before your session with your participant. Make sure there's nothing in there that you'll be caught by surprise for not having reviewed it. Sometimes people get very specific with their feedback. I think they always try to be constructive. There's not anything that I've seen particularly destructive in the written comments, but you just want to familiarize yourself with the written comments. And then when you're doing your preparation, use the written comments to support support the numerical data that you see, or to ask questions of the participant. Remember that one of the things we talked about in the certification workshop is that good facilitators, good debriefers, come to the session with good questions for the participant. And in that vein, I just want to mention before we wrap up a little bit about the facilitator's role. What it is and what it isn't. So what is your role as a facilitator? Well, it's really an opportunity to help the participant, if nothing else, help them understand how to read and interpret the report. If they leave that session and they're still confused about what the reds and the greens and the graphs mean, then maybe you haven't quite done your job with that particular participant. So I always make sure that if nothing else happens, that they understand how to read the report. And you'll get a feel for that very early in the conversation, whether you need to spend more time on it or whether they're ready to move on and talk specifically about their results. Helping them identify patterns. Sometimes it's very hard for them to see themes and patterns because they get so down into the data. I think it's very helpful to ask them, to remind them as they're in the item level data and they're looking at their feedback, to keep an eye on the ratings they gave themselves at the item level. Sometimes they just overlook that altogether. They may be disappointing in the ratings they're getting from their raters on a particular survey question, and I might come back and say, well, you're getting somewhere between a 2.5 and a 3 from everybody, but you gave yourself a 2 on that. So what were you thinking? Or the opposite of that, where they gave themselves a high score and everybody's coming in low. That's very valuable to know that might be a potential blind spot for them. I will say that the role of the facilitator is like a tour guide through the feedback report, and it's a little bit of a journey, and it's the facilitator's role is to help them with the beginning of something, right? So you're helping them read and interpret the report, but to also help the participant understand that they own the data and any follow-up action that they're going to take as a result. So you want to make sure that they're clear on the information in the report and that they're starting to make that mental bridge from the data to a plan of some kind. Because until they start create and start carrying out a plan for their development, the only thing that's happened is assessment. No development has taken place yet. So you also play a critical role in helping them understand that the next steps are what's going to make the difference for them. By the same token, what is the one-on-one session not? What is your facilitator's role not? And one thing is, it's not a presentation by you to the participants. So don't put that kind of pressure on yourself that you feel like you have to have a presentation about their data ready to go. It's a conversation, it's a discussion. I will say to the participant at the very beginning, I have not prepared a presentation to you about your data. I have some questions. I have some things I want to talk about that I've noticed in the report. I'm sure you have some questions, and it's going to take both of us because I have a little bit of expertise about the tool. You have all the expertise about your context, and it's going to take both of us working together and having a conversation for this to be successful. And I say that right up front just because I want to be clear on expectations. All right, it's not psychotherapy. I don't have to say any more about that other than every now and then you might run into a participant that expects this to be a deep counseling session, and I just want to make clear at the beginning that what we're doing is a behavioral assessment. It's not a psychological test of some kind. And also that it's the third one there, it's not deep coaching. It's a one-time, typically, one-on-one session to help you get clarity on the data and to help you position yourself to create a development plan for yourself to be more effective in your role. So that's a quick refresher, and I hope it's been helpful. And I just want to say that sometimes we overlook the importance of this work and the impact we can have on someone who is opening themselves up, being a little bit vulnerable to getting some feedback to coworkers, and sometimes the most valuable asset, the most valuable service you provide to these people is just being there for them and with them, willing to listen to them, talk about their feedback, answer questions, and just be there with them through this journey. So thanks for your attention to the clip, and good luck.